He walked into the room and instantly recognized the child. The air in the sterile hospital room hung thick and cold, smelling faintly of antiseptic and old regret. It was 24 years after that devastating day, but for Noah Reid, it felt like the nightmare had just begun. He was 24 years old, standing on the cusp of an identity he never knew he had, and the world was about to shatter for everyone involved. He grew up as Noah Davis in a working-class neighborhood, believing he was nothing special, just another kid, a survivor, with a loving but intensely private mother named Helen. He was a biracial young man in a predominantly white community, and the subtle differences he felt his whole life suddenly seemed to scream a much larger truth. His world was small, defined by shift work and rent deadlines. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the sprawling city, a world away in both distance and ethos, the Reid dynasty prepared for its grand succession. The Reids were not just wealthy, they were a pillar of the state's elite, old money, with a pristine, carefully curated image. Charles Reid, the patriarch, was a titan of industry, his face a constant feature in business journals. His daughter, Eleanor Reid, was being groomed as the only successor. There were photo shoots in marble halls, press conferences, and endless interviews, a meticulously polished performance of a perfect, prosperous white family. Eleanor was beautiful, poised, and utterly alone in her gilded cage, unaware her life was built on a monumental, buried lie. Noah's life changed the moment his friend, Leo, shoved his phone screen in front of his face during a slow lunch break. "Dude, check this out. It's the Reids' charity gala. Look at the heir, Eleanor Reid." The camera panned over the opulent scene, lingering on the Reid family as they posed for the cameras, and then, for a split second, a close-up of Eleanor. Noah froze. It wasn't just a fleeting resemblance. The image on the screen was a mirror, a near-perfect reflection. The same strong jawline, the same scatter of tiny freckles across the bridge of the nose, and the oddly familiar, almost identical way she unconsciously held her hands clasped in front of her. Leo had to nudge him. "Earth to Noah. She's stunning, right?" But Noah wasn't seeing the stunning heiress. He was seeing a ghost of himself, a potential he'd never considered. His friend, noticing Noah's sudden, unsettling silence, froze the frame. "That's Eleanor Reid, the one who's taking over the company, the billionaire's only daughter." Something deep and terrifying started to unravel inside Noah. He had never seen anyone who looked more like him in his entire life, and the fact that she was the daughter of a legendary billionaire from a family he knew nothing about felt like the cruelest cosmic joke. He tried to laugh it off, forcing a casual tone. "Yeah, I guess. Coincidence happens. Everyone has a doppelganger." But the forced sound of his own voice didn't convince him, and judging by the look of concern on Leo's face, it didn't convince his friend either. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He watched the clip 50 times, then searched for Eleanor Reid until dawn. He couldn't shake the feeling of profound displacement. The next morning, he went straight to his mother, Helen, a woman who had always been his rock, but who now looked oddly frail. He tried to introduce the topic casually over breakfast. "Mom, you know the Reid family, the ones who own the massive tech company?" Helen's face tightened instantly, a subtle but unmistakable mask of fear pulling at the corners of her mouth. Her hand, which was reaching for her coffee cup, hesitated, then slowly retracted. "Noah, I'm not sure who you're talking about. Just finish your breakfast, it's going to get cold." Her reaction was all the confirmation he needed. He pressed harder, telling her about the uncanny resemblance. The color drained completely from her face. "Noah, drop it, right now. You are my son, and that is all that matters. Do not go looking for trouble where there is none." The finality in her voice was laced with a desperate plea, a clear warning, but Noah was already too far down the rabbit hole. He was no longer looking for trouble, he was looking for himself. He started with the basics. He requested his birth certificate, but the hospital stonewalled him, citing archival issues and incomplete records. He tried to get his hospital records, only to be told they were missing due to a supposed administrative error from 2 decades ago. The official responses were frustratingly vague, and, to Noah's growing suspicion, coordinated. He knew his mother would never tell him the truth willingly, not after seeing the raw fear in her eyes, so he started searching through the few boxes of old, dusty photos she kept hidden in the attic, the ones she always strictly forbade him from touching. He was looking for any anomaly, any inconsistency. Finally, behind a faded, cracked photo of him as a baby, smiling widely in a simple yellow blanket, he found it. A small, panicked hand had scrawled a name on the back of the picture, in a barely legible, shaky script: Margaret Reed. His heart hammering against his ribs, Noah sprinted back down to his laptop and Googled the name, Margaret Reed. It took seconds for the results to flash across the screen. Margaret Reed, the late wife of Charles Reed, the matriarch of the Reed Empire. She had died in a tragic car accident 21 years ago, when her daughter, Eleanor, was only 3 years old. But the timeline didn't make sense. If Margaret died when Eleanor was 3, why was her name on a photo of Noah, who was 24? And why was his own mother so terrified of that name? He confronted Helen one last time, holding the photo up like evidence in a courtroom. Tell me, who is Margaret Reed? And why is her name on my photo? Helen looked at the picture, and the strength finally left her. She collapsed onto the sofa, tears streaming down her face, and slowly, painstakingly, the truth began to emerge, piece by agonizing piece. He was taken. Noah wasn't abandoned. He wasn't unwanted. He wasn't an orphan left on a doorstep. He was stolen. 24 years ago, Margaret Reed had given birth to twins, a white daughter, Eleanor, and a biracial son, Noah. The world stopped for Charles Reed the moment he saw the boy, a biracial child. It was a scandal that threatened to unravel his entire meticulously constructed public image. It suggested an affair, a secret life, and the ruin of his family's pristine, old-money reputation. In a fit of cold, terrifying rage, the billionaire had demanded the boy vanish. He is not an heir. He is a mistake. I want him gone. Erase him. But Margaret, despite her privileged upbringing, had a core of steel. She refused. She couldn't abandon her son. She hid the baby in the hospital and desperately sought help. The nurse who responded to her plea, who saw the fear and the love in the wealthy woman's eyes, was Helen Davis, Noah's adoptive mother. Helen was supposed to help Margaret find a safe way to raise both children. But before Margaret could make her escape, a sudden, brutal car accident took her life. Charles Reed seized the opportunity. He paid off every staff member at the hospital, silenced the doctors, destroyed the records, and officially labeled the biracial baby boy as deceased. The only daughter, Eleanor, became the solitary, legitimate heir, and Noah, the true son, the rightful twin, became nothing more than a ghost child, his existence professionally and mercilessly erased by his own father. The revelation hit Noah like a physical blow, leaving him gasping for air. His whole life had been a lie, a side effect of his biological father's fear and prejudice. He wasn't just a kid from the wrong side of the tracks. He was the heir that was deliberately discarded. The grief for his real mother, the woman who fought for him until her last breath, was immediate and crushing. The rage against his biological father, the man who condemned him to a life of anonymity to protect his stocks and reputation, was a searing fire. The next day, Noah didn't bother with a formal meeting or an appointment. Fueled by righteous fury, he burst into the polished, sterile, marble lobby of the Reed Foundation headquarters. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. As he bypassed the stunned security desk and approached the reception, in his hand, he clutched the undeniable, irreplaceable evidence, a slightly faded photograph of Margaret Reed, radiant and young, lying in a hospital bed, holding 2 bundled newborns, one white, one biracial. He slapped the photo onto the gleaming mahogany counter. I demand to speak to Charles Reed, now. I demand a DNA test. I demand the truth. The professional calm of the lobby shattered. A phalanx of impeccably dressed, silent security personnel descended upon him immediately. They didn't speak, they simply lifted him and dragged him out. ignoring his furious shouts. The photograph fluttered to the floor as they tossed him unceremoniously onto the sidewalk. The following morning, the tabloids exploded, headlines screaming the scandal across the state. Mystery man claims to be illegitimate heir. The story was sensational. A sudden claim, an alleged cover-up, a hint of biracial identity and old money prejudice. Charles Reed, however, was a master of media manipulation. He went on national television, his face, a picture of calm, polished benevolence, a gentle smile playing on his lips. He called Noah a fraud. "This young man is a disturbed opportunist, a common scammer seeking to leverage my family's good name for 15 minutes of fame. His claims are baseless, his photos easily manipulated. We will, of course, be pursuing legal action." The narrative was simple: a desperate, mentally unstable young man trying to shake down a successful, respectable family. The public was divided, but the power of Charles Reed's public persona was undeniable. But one person couldn't look away from the TV screen. Eleanor Reed, sitting in her father's penthouse, watched the televised denial with a sickening feeling of dread. She had seen the leaked photo online, the image of her mother holding the two babies, and she had seen Noah's face. The resemblance was too strong, too unsettling to be dismissed as a coincidence. Her father's calm denial felt rehearsed, hollow. Something in her knew he was lying. Driven by an urgent, terrifying compulsion, she tracked Noah down through a legal aid clinic he had contacted. They met in a dimly lit, nondescript cafe miles away from the Reed empire's shadow. Eleanor wore a simple trench coat and dark sunglasses, a desperate attempt at anonymity. Noah was wary, cynical, expecting another attempt to buy his silence. But Eleanor wasn't there to silence him. She looked him in the eye, her own reflection, staring back at her, and extended a small, sealed envelope. "I need to know the truth," she whispered, her voice cracking with the emotional weight of the potential revelation. "I took a hair sample, secretly, from my own brush. I went to a separate lab. Please, tell me I'm wrong." The days of waiting for the results were an agonizing blur. When the envelope finally arrived at Noah's apartment, he called Eleanor, and they opened it together over a hesitant video call. The two of them stared at the clinical report displayed on the screen, the numbers swimming before their eyes until they settled on the undeniable conclusion: half match, twin level match. Silence descended, a heavy, suffocating blanket of disbelief and dawning comprehension. The brother she never knew existed, the one her father had ruthlessly erased from history, was real. He was standing in front of her, separated by a screen, yet closer than anyone had ever been. Eleanor didn't cry. Her expression was one of cold, absolute certainty. She looked at Noah, her eyes burning with a sudden, devastating clarity, and whispered one sentence that sealed their father's fate: "He lied to both of us." The confrontation took place in Charles Reed's private study, a room lined with rare books and the trophies of his successful deception. Noah and Eleanor walked in together, a unified front that immediately stripped the patriarch of his usual composure. Charles Reed, the titan who had controlled every aspect of his life and the lives of those around him, looked genuinely afraid for the first time. The mask of polished benevolence was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly face of a cornered man. He tried every tactic in his arsenal. First, he tried to buy them off, his voice dripping with false concern. "We can make this go away, Eleanor. You, my daughter, don't need this kind of mess. Noah, I'll set up a trust fund, a generous, quiet settlement. You'll never have to work again." When that failed, his tone shifted to raw aggression. "I will threaten lawsuits. I will have you both disinherited, Eleanor. You will lose everything. Noah, you will not only be labeled a fraud, but I will make sure you spend the next decade in court. Your life will be destroyed." Finally, his voice dropped to a chilling whisper, the threat hanging heavy in the air: "I will make sure this problem disappears permanently." But the twins were prepared. They had anticipated his every move. They were recording everything: the threats, the bribery attempts, the chilling admissions. The next day, the audio of Charles Reed's confession and threats, was anonymously leaked to every major news outlet and social media platform simultaneously. The world turned on its axis. The public outcry was immediate, overwhelming, and absolute. Stocks crashed as the company's reputation was tarnished by the revelation of corporate prejudice and familial abuse. Sponsors fled from the foundation and the company's charitable endeavors. The fury of the people was a tidal wave, a wealthy, white billionaire systematically hiding and disowning his biracial son, just to preserve a racist, archaic image of perfection. It became the scandal of the decade, a perfect storm of wealth, race, and betrayal. The board of the Reed Foundation, facing an unmanageable crisis and a total loss of public trust, was forced to act. Charles Reed, stripped of his power and his dignity, was removed from his own company, ousted by the very empire he had built on a foundation of lies. Eleanor, standing at the precipice of her inheritance, made her final, definitive choice. She rejected the succession and the fortune, publicly, stating that she would not accept the inheritance, or any part of the company, until her brother, Noah, was fully and legally recognized as an equal heir, and the record of his mother's sacrifice was set straight. And Noah, finally, stood before the cameras, not as a scammer or a mystery man, but as the truth. He held the official, corrected birth record in his hands. It had his real name, it had the name of his real mother, Margaret Reed. He looked directly into the lens, his expression, a mix of profound grief and hard-won victory. He spoke for himself and for the mother who had died trying to save him, his voice, echoing with the clarity of a lie finally exposed. I wasn't a secret, I wasn't a mistake, I was erased, but I'm here now, and the truth has a right to be heard. The cameras flashed, the news anchors spoke his name, and the ghost child finally stepped out of the shadow and into his rightful place in the world. The dynasty was broken, but the family was, finally, whole.